Hey, Founders Fire family. Welcome to the Founders Fire podcast. I'm Eric Beck. Excited to dive into a really important topic today, which is doing the impossible. This is a really important one if you are a type A, overachiever, go-getter, knock the doors down, make it happen kind of person. This is one for you. And I think one that's important for our season that we're in right now, kind of coming up on Christmas and whatnot. So big ideas today include a quote from Heraclitus, a song by John Mayer, The Power of Hope, Rats in the Tank, It's Worse Than You Think, and a little bit of insight from a friend from decades ago, Calvin, from Calvin and Hobbes. So we're going to dive right in today, and hopefully this will be practical and helpful for you guys. Obviously, if you like it, please give us a thumbs up or the stars or the share or the whatever all that good stuff is. It does help us get our podcast to the top to help more people just like you. Because ultimately, what we're about at Founders Fire is kindling that spark and bringing it to a roaring flame. Whatever is in your heart to accomplish, in particular through the vehicle of business, it's in there. Wage slavery is not the way forward. That's not how you want to live, just trading time for money. You also realize that the economy and the system that we've inherited is fundamentally broken. It's designed to keep you trapped, to keep you stuck. And at Founders Fire, we're all about liberation, freedom, and throwing off those chains. That starts with thinking differently, but it also starts with acting differently. So let's kind of dive into this. I'll start with a quote from Heraclitus: "Nothing endures but change." And if you think about it, we all tend to respond to change in somewhat of a negative way. We think, well, if someone says, hey, I think you could change the way you're doing your sales. We may tend to hear that as like, well, what's wrong with how I'm doing my sales? Oftentimes change is a threat because it could imply we're not doing something so great. But sometimes change feels uncomfortable simply because it is different. And we like what we know. We don't like the unknown. Why is it that we like the daytime, but we're afraid at nighttime? If you ever think about that, probably because thousands and thousands of generations of people knew that if you could see the problem, you have a much better chance of dealing with it. But at night, when you can't see the problem, that's a bad time, right? So even if it's the saber-toothed tiger, or even if it is a change at your vocation or your work or your business, when we can't see through to the change, we often get quite nervous in the service, so to speak. I want to take a different angle on that today, and I want to talk about it as it relates to generational change. So some of you are business owners, some of you are entrepreneurs, some of you are looking to become one of those two. Great. You're all welcome, because what we're here to do is to produce change, and not just any change, but change that sets us free to really fulfill the calling that's in our heart. So let's kind of go back to basics here. Generation by generation, we have all said and heard, oh, the old fogies want to do it the old way. But it is, and here comes the criticisms, it's slow, it's inefficient, it's stupid, it's just the wrong way to do things. Why would we do it that way? And we can be lulled into thinking that this generational sort of breach or friction has always been that way. And I would say that it's probably been that way to some extent, but not nearly as much as what is indicated in the musical from Days Gone By, Fiddler on the Roof. Okay, remember Tevye singing Tradition, right? What is he trying to say? He was like, there's a way that we've always done it. And that way provides security. That way provides stability. It's what we know. And it's who we are. And that tradition, that way of doing things, that lack of change is what is being fought against in this musical, where daughter by daughter, we don't want to do it that way. We love you, but you are more than your traditions. You're more than what you're stuck in. We've got to move forward. There's got to be progress. So I will concede right at the beginning of this podcast that many, many generations, the younger generation, has wanted to do things different than the prior generation. But I will say that we're facing something quite different than that. Because probably for 10,000 years or so, I would say maybe up into the 1700s, really every single generation, the gap between the older and the younger, from a thinking standpoint, from an operations standpoint, if you want to use that word, really was minuscule. If your dad was a farmer, you're going to be a farmer. What's changed about farming? Not much. If your dad was a blacksmith, you're going to be a blacksmith. If your parents were hunters, gatherers, you're going to be a hunter. You're going to be a gatherer, a stonemason, fill in the blank. Pretty much everything that came before you is exactly like what you're going to be doing. And really, there isn't much change. Now, who's in power might change or some things like that. But pretty much nothing changes, maybe until around the 16 or 1700s, because we start seeing leaps in technology that totally change culture. And now it's a huge gap. So the difference between riding on a horse versus a horse and a buggy versus a car. Okay, having an airplane that is a novel, contraption that people fall out of the sky in, think the Wright brothers and whatnot, right? Versus having a 737, right? So it's not like it's a small change. It's an enormous change. And what was going on with these enormous leaps in technology were changes in worldview. And so this starts happening in earnest, I'm going to say sometime in the 1700s. You guys have probably all heard me talk about the fourth turning, this idea that every 4 generations, the saeculum, a pattern happens. That first generation suffers, fights the big evil in the world, the dragon, if you will, conquers it but barely. The second generation has known the hardship and the sacrifice of that first generation, and it's all about rebuilding. It's all about the collective and giving of ourselves for the greater good. That third generation, though, starts to experience the wealth that all that sacrifice has produced. They're the ones with the paved roads. They're the ones with the great schools and electricity and all of the modern conveniences. They're the ones who are really thriving. But the fourth generation, they don't even know anyone who was alive in that first turning. That's just a story, and those values and those principles seem to have washed by the wayside. And now, instead of struggling and choosing our hard, we talked about that last time, diving into the depths of the effort that it takes to really keep on the road of mastery, we're now wealthy. We're now fat. We're satiated. We have all these luxuries. We don't even need to think about survival or protection or anything. It's now all about just the complete reins off expression. And then what happens with that fourth generation? They collapse. And we have the huge problem again. And now it starts that cycle over. Well, we are in a fourth turning. And one of the things that we have to recognize as leaders is it's different depending on the generation you're in right now. So I was born in 1971. So my generation I still think of as the analog generation. The next generations are all digital generations. And so as they grew up, the structure of their learning, the structure of their play was wildly different. Think about how different it is to watch a TV show from the 80s, as in the 1980s, from a modern TV show. It's so different. The timing is so different. The news. Look at how the news is so different. The music. Well, the music is worse. You could go backwards and it'd get better. but look at all these different areas of culture. That was a little cultural snobbery. I'll admit it. I'm sorry about that. I'm not fully redeemed. But look at all these ways things have changed, right? And what's changed with it is not just that I don't have to wait to get that song. I can get 1 billion songs every month for $9. I used to have to work a whole month just to earn $9 to get 9 songs on that one album that I saved up to buy. Not only is the speed of everything, the amount of choices, all that we know about all that, right? But the worldview associated with it and the values and the language, those have changed too, and at a faster rate than we've ever seen before in human history. Now, if you're going to grow a business, you're going to need people. And if you need people, you need to understand what I'm talking about right now. Okay. If you have kids or you're going to have children, you need to understand what I'm talking about right now, because there is an absolute war to separate the generations. And I feel like pretty much in each generation, somebody can really put their finger on what's going on, what that situation really is. And, I'm going to just yield the stage now to my good friend, John Mayer. We're not friends. I don't know John Mayer. But I do respect his music, and he's an amazing singer and guitar player. And in this particular song, boy, did he put his finger right on what I want to talk about today. The song is called Waiting on the World to Change. And I'm just going to read the lyrics. Some of the choruses repeat, so I've taken out some of the repeats. But if you know the song, try to just hear it without the music maybe. And if you don't know the song, again, let's just focus on the words here. Me and all my friends, we're all misunderstood. And think of this as 30-somethings and 20-somethings. Okay? They say we stand for nothing, and there's no way we ever could. Now we see the world, now we see everything that's going wrong with the world and those who lead it. We just feel like we don't have the means to rise above and beat it. So we keep waiting on the world to change. It's hard to beat the system when we're standing at a distance. So we keep on waiting on the world to change. Now, if we had the power to bring our neighbors home from war, they would have never missed a Christmas. No more ribbons on their door. When you trust your television, what you get is what you got. Because when they own the information, they can bend it all they want. That's why we're waiting on the world to change. It's not that we don't care. We just know that the fight ain't fair. One day our generation is going to rule the population. So we keep on waiting on the world to change. We're waiting on the world to change. Now, some of you guys who have heard my TEDx talks have heard me talk about this generational gap. I think it is the most important social issue that we're facing. There's a lot of important issues. But to me, healing this one, fixing this one is the most important. Why? Because a lot of people in the analog generations view the digital generations as myopic, as unmotivated, as selfish, as ne'er-do-wells, lazy, fill in the blank. And there are people in the younger generations that would exemplify that. But there's also people in the older generations that exemplify that. I wouldn't say that I've seen this to be true. I feel like this is a cop-out. I feel like this is an excuse. I feel like this is lazy thinking. Because if you look at the way they were raised, I don't just mean the parenting, but I mean the system they were raised in. The modern world system has produced a way of thinking that I think John Mayer puts his finger on exactly. What were they trained to do? To wait. The whole song is about waiting. We see the problems. We know what's going on. But the fight's not fair. We don't have the means to rise above this and beat this, so we're just waiting. We're just waiting on it to change. I would take that lyric and modify it a little bit from my time on the TEDx stage. They're not waiting on the world to change as much as they're waiting on the game to load. They're waiting for the structure so they can walk into that structure and then do what they know how to do. But our older generations, the analog generations, haven't provided that structure for them. We built it in the name of, Nintendo and Xbox and movies and television and entertainment. We built it and profited from it. And I heard, I think it was Charles Eisenstein who said this. He said, we've stolen from our children the depth and the meaning of their lives, and then we've sold it back to them in a digital world. Yeah, you don't go outside and play anymore. Well, hop on Xbox. You don't do things that are heroic anymore. Yeah, well, hop on this game. You don't spend time with your friends. Well, here, get on Facebook. We've taken the organic world, usually because of the motivation of fear. We want to keep everybody safe. And everything has become about safety. And what we've robbed really everyone, not just the younger generations, of is risk. And without risk, there is no courage. And without courage, you cannot operationalize the virtues that make life great. And that's what we've done. And that's what I think John Mayer is writing about as a representative. I'm going to just nominate him as that. As a representative of his generation, he's saying, look, we're waiting. We see what's going on. We're not stupid. It's not that we don't care. That we stand, what he says, we stand for nothing. There's no way we ever could. We see what's going on. We're misunderstood. I think he's right. I think they are misunderstood. Now, here's the thing that makes this actionable. You may say, okay, I can kind of see where you're coming from, Eric. I can see that maybe in your kids or in younger generations, maybe your employees. I can see it. All right, but what do we do about that? I can't just create a video game life so that people can just walk into that. And in some ways, you can do that. And you're going to have to do that because the system has moved in such a direction so quickly that they literally are speaking a different language. Okay, so when somebody says, somebody unfriended me, or someone followed me, or someone liked me, right? Think of all those words that you're like, what does that even mean, right? And in our old-timey vocabulary, it means something totally different. When somebody says, hey, I don't know what this is, why don't you Google it? Right? My generation, those born in the 70s, were probably the first generation to have used that and be like, yeah, I get that. I get that that is a verb, instead of Google being the mathematical number that you probably knew that it was, or maybe you didn't know that it was. But that just proves my point, right? The language has changed so quick because the structure has changed so quick, and that creates the gap. Now, if we're going to get things done, though, with people, we have to understand the gap. Can you imagine Patton standing up in front of the Third Army to give orders about what was going to happen that day, but he was speaking in Portuguese? Right? How effective would his genius be if his troops couldn't understand him? That is you. You are Patton. You are Patton. You're about to be Patton, or you're aspiring to be Patton. People who listen to this podcast are leaders. If you can't communicate with your team, you will not be effective. You have to master this skill. And I'm here to tell you, they don't speak your language. And forcing them to speak your language isn't going to work. You're going to have to learn their language. You're going to have to meet them. You're going to have to run out to them, just like the story of the prodigal son, right? It says the father ran out to meet the son. The older generation runs to the younger generation, not the other way around. You don't sit over there with your arms folded and say, hey, come to me. You run to them. Why? I'll tell you why. Because they are losing hope fast. They're losing hope because of the endless left-right game in politics. They're losing hope because they're all in debt. They're losing hope because a good, hard 8 hours of work at a restaurant is not enough to pay for even rent, much less food or insurance or anything else that they need. They are getting crushed. The idea of buying a home, an impossibility, an absolute impossibility. Even the idea of going to college, not because of grades or intelligence, because college is useless. College is just indoctrination in a really radical worldview. It used to be about learning from all worldviews, all points of views. This is the melting pot. This is where we have ideas that compete with each other. Now, it's really like the behavior police, the thought police. It's just bizarre. And it costs so much. I think the only thing that's more expensive now than it was a decade ago than healthcare is education. And I may switch this around. Maybe I think healthcare is risen in cost the most, but second place is higher education. So this is crushing the hope out of people. And if you don't take that into account when you see and observe and try to lead them and see their behavior, you're going to misinterpret them. You're going to do what John Mayer said. You're going to misunderstand everybody. Me and all my friends, we're all misunderstood. So let me tell you this experiment, which is a little harrowing. So sorry for those of you who have sensitive ears. But there's an experiment done where they put a rat, or rats, I assume, in a bucket of water. And you may have heard of this. You can Google it and go find out about it if you want to. But basically, you put a rat in a bucket of water where there's no way the rat could get out, and they just set a timer to see how long it would swim. And most of the rats swam somewhere between, I believe, 8 and 10 minutes. before they dropped under the water. And if they were not rescued, they would have died. Okay. And that seemed to be true for all these rats that they tested this on. Then they had an idea, what would happen if right before the rat's head goes underwater, they actually rescue the rat, let it rest for 5 or 10 minutes and put it back in. Would it keep swimming? Would it be like, oh my gosh, you're torturing me. This is terrible. What's going on? The rat that was rescued, allowed to rest, put back in the water, swam for 6 hours. So we go from 8 to 10 minutes to 6 hours. Well, did the rat get stronger? What changed? I don't think we know, but I think we can draw some pretty clear lines from this. I think the rat had hope. Now, I don't know what rats know and don't know. I don't know about their level of consciousness, and frankly, neither do you. But something changed. Something changed. And I think this is wildly important to understand the role of hope. Now, I know plenty of people have said hope is not a strategy. Hope is la la land. Hope is just, pie in the sky, Pollyanna. I understand. I echo your sentiments. But I will tell you this. If you have ever lost hope, it's dark. It's really dark. It's pitch black. And you're in the most vulnerable moment of your life. I don't mean that you feel bad. I don't mean that you're bummed out because you got some bad news. I'm talking about when hope extinguishes, literally all your defenses are down. We need to not underestimate that those of us who grew up in the 70s and 80s and before had an inherent systemic hope that the younger generations today do not have. Now, you can say some of the politics and economics and other issues were just as big a problem back then as they are now. I think that's probably true. But something that is different is that even if that were true, the way society played itself out for most people, there was the hope that the future will be better, and there's a good chance that if I put down my head and make it happen, it will happen, or at least it'll get close to happening. Now, again, is that true for every single person and every single demographic, 100%, all in 1973? No, I realize that. But I think in aggregate, though, it would have been astounding to most people to think that the government would actually intentionally lie to you. Maybe they had some questions about JFK. Maybe they had some questions about the Vietnam War. But in the main, those are exceptions and conspiracy theories, and nobody wants to consider or believe that that's true. Well, that's not how people think today. And the reason is multiplied, just example after example after example. Okay. What happens when that level of corruption is known? Hope goes away. And when hope goes away, we're really, really vulnerable. So I was listening to a podcast recently, and the gentleman speaking brought up this idea of if you think things are hard, you actually need to understand that it's way worse than you think. And he used an example that I use from time to time, which is the to-do list. You guys have all heard me teach on time debt. Time debt is a self-imposed mental disorder. Not a laughing matter, but I kind of think it's funny to say it that way. But it is true. What is it? It is that you believe you have more to do than time to do it. Okay, you don't. You have exactly the amount of time you need to do what you must do. You don't have more time. You don't have time for other stuff. So if you haven't considered maybe wandering over to Founders Fire and looking at what we do, this is one of those key ideas that motivates a lot of people to start getting coached with us or come to a retreat, maybe purchase an online course, foundersfire.com. There's a little ad for that. But time debt is a huge, huge concept. And we have quite a few of these in our foundations course to really help people break free. If you are under the illusion that you have more to do than time to do it, then you are a slave. And we would like to help you break those shackles off, because it's just not true. You're believing something that's not true, like the baby elephant tied to the post that is now 20 tons and could snap that post easily, believes that it can't. Okay, it's that level of deception. And it puts you in time debt, which means this unending stress, this unending feeling of not good enough, never going to make it, never going to get out. And that puts you into this whole yo-yo behavior loop of work way too hard, then binge whatever, Netflix, food, you name it. And it's this yo-yo effect of I hate my life so much that I have to self-medicate to make it through another day, but then I try again and it just punches me in the nose, and back and forth and back and forth. And what does that do? It takes all your hope. And when that is systemically true and fueled by things like social media and legacy media and etc., okay, it is a vice grip, and it is life and death. So I want to give you this idea that it's not just hard to manage your time. This is what this gentleman was sharing. It's not just hard to have a good relationship. It's impossible. So stop thinking of it that way. Stop assigning yourself the impossible thing. In other words, I think I need to do 800 things today. And I think that that's true. And I try my darndest and only do 600 and see I failed. Okay. It's not that it's hard to do the 800. The sooner you come to the realization that it's impossible to do the 800, the sooner you start realizing how many areas in your life you're doing this exact same thing. You are giving yourself impossible things to do. I heard that social media could be credited for this modern achievement. It's taken perfect and made it normal. So good is now boring. Social media has taken perfect. What? Perfect looks, perfectly funny, perfect this, perfect that. It's taken perfect and made it normal. Everyone's perfect. Just start swiping and start scrolling. Look at all the perfect everything. So much so that what we would consider good is boring. Okay. What does this do? It removes hope. You cannot let this happen. This is setting standards that are impossible. It's not just that it's hard, it's impossible. Stop trying. Well, wait a minute. Aren't I supposed to hustle? Don't I have to have the side hustle and the this and be the boss babe and the this thing and the that thing and the all that crazy rat race energy? No. We're human beings. We're not human doings. We're not human slaves. We're not little robots on the treadmill of life with the top goal of productivity at any cost. No. We are designed to follow a plan. And that's it. When I was in the military, if you got a lawful order, your only objective was to follow that order. We think that there are no orders, that everything's an opportunity. Everything must be pursued at all times, in all directions, in all ways, and that's impossible. And that's why we feel so crappy. So, the good news is the sooner you start seeing that it is actually impossible to change the world, it is impossible to fill in the blank with this thing that some of you've assigned yourself, the sooner you take that mantle of crushing impossibility off your shoulders, the sooner you have decided what is enough. How much is enough? Knowing how much is enough and training your brain to focus on that is freedom. Now, I do like the Navy SEAL phrase, or I heard it first in a Navy SEAL training video, where they say anything worth doing is worth overdoing. That's funny and cool and kind of true in a certain way. But the reality is, at a society level, that is suicide. Okay, we are overdoing everything. And we're being driven to do that so that we purchase something that's just going to break, that we don't really need. Getting out of that game starts by realizing that that is the game. Oh, let's make that game better. Let's fix that game. Not possible. Or are you saying we should just give up? Should we do what John Mayer says and just wait on the world to change? No. What we need to do is to become vision-driven. We need to become incrementalists. We need to look at what is the path to our creative maximum. How do we bring our gifts to the world in such a way that we're meeting a very, very simple need in a very, very simple way, but we do it very well? Not compared to everybody else, but compared to what we can bring and what lights up our heart, that fire that Founders Fire is about. All right, so let's land the plane on this. A little bit of a lighter note. Calvin and Hobbes. You guys remember Calvin and Hobbes? So Calvin says, you know what's weird? Day by day, nothing seems to change. But pretty soon, everything's different. Things will change. Things can change. But when you put yourself in the position of driving the entire truck of the world, you're putting yourself in the position of being a slave. If you then decide, well, what good is it anyway? One person can't make a difference. You're in another type of slavery. Where do we want to go? We want to find the middle way. We want to find the way that we understand we're here for a purpose, we're here for a reason, and that focusing on that is enough. How much is enough food? How much is enough money? How much is enough attention? How much is enough clothes? Answering that question gets us out of the rat race. And once we answer that question, we start to amass more and more influence and more ability to set other people free. And that's what the whole game is about. Now, I think that's going to happen and is happening and must happen in the marketplace, but not the marketplace, capital M, your marketplace, just you, just in your small business, just in your job, just in your area of influence. Because if we take care of what we have, in the Old Testament, the story is that God said to Moses, go and set my people free. Moses says, I can't do it. God says, what's in your hand? I love that story because it implies you already have what you need. But if you're looking out in all directions, except for what's in your hand, you're going to feel frustrated. You're going to feel hopeless. But I want to tell you, you have what you need. Now we need to do something with it, and we need to do it strategically, and we need to build some momentum, and that will change the world. Your world, one corner of it at a time. Well, I hope this has been helpful for you guys. Hope it's feeling motivational. We're going to spend some time on this coming up in January, at the end of the month in January, at our retreat in Destin. Our theme is supercharging your sales, growing your profit, improving your cash flow while working less, cutting your stress and having the energy to enjoy it. You're like, what? That's not even possible. I'm going to promise you it is possible. It is, and it all has to do with focus. It has to do with learning how to do business a different way than you may know about. We would love for you to be there and join us. We don't have a ton of space, so head over to foundersfire.com/retreats. Click on the registration details. You can read all about it. You can read about the day-by-day agenda. This is 4 months of our master coaching program that you get in 4 days. It is absolutely amazing. If you want 2025 to be off the charts, this is a great way to do it. We would love to see you there. Besides that, visit us at Founders Fire. Let us know what you think about the podcast or any topics you'd like to have me cover. Again, thank you guys for listening, and we'll talk next time.